Welcome, gamers and readers. I am Mariah Titans, the host of the Weekend Game Show, where I educate on and discuss different aspects of game development to show why video games can take years to make to prevent another Cyberpunk 2077 scenario. Welcome to another Let's Read Some Shit video where I read aloud portions, emphasis on portions for DMCA and copyright reasons of a couple of books regarding video games, their creation, their impact on the world, and to show the legitimacy of video games as an artistic medium, and or whatever I feel like reading at the time. In addition, I also hope to promote literacy as a whole. If this is something you're interested in, then you can find the other Let's Read Some Shit videos on my YouTube channel under the handle @MariahTitans, and also on Buy Me a Coffee, where educational quotes regarding video games and literacy are also shared. If you tip through Buy Me a Coffee, 15% of the proceeds minimum goes to Kids Need to Read, whose mission is to help children discover the joy of reading and the power of a literate mind. Of a literate mind. Okay. Lastly, I also provide artist shoutouts to human artists to combat AI art theft. All of them can be seen on the Become Empowered Instagram, all one word, one E in the middle, and also on Buy Me a Coffee. All rights reserved by the artist. Hashtag create, don't scrape. Speaking of artist shoutouts, you see what I did there? Alright, so here we have Ursula Milligan. Hopefully I said that correctly. They have an Instagram, as you can see there. I found their post on ArtStation. And they have an email address if you wish to get in contact with them. Why am I now getting the hiccups? I disapprove. Stop it. Alright, so I am pulling it up. Because, whoa. I almost closed all my tabs. Whoo! Okay, so today's artist shoutout was inspired by today's word of the day, which is baon. B-A-O-N, and it means in Philippine English money, food, or provisions taken to school, work, or on a journey. And this piece of art is called Travel Pack. So, perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. Al. With that out of the way, for the most part, I will be showing that again when we close. So, these Let's Read Some Shit videos, I also call them read alouds, tend to go about an hour-ish, though they can be longer, and they go as follows. I read the summary on the back of the book, if applicable. I read the foreword and preface, if applicable. If there is no introduction, I read part of the first chapter. And today I decided to focus on mythology for these book choices. With video games or any artistic medium, if you want to portray a myth, whether it's existing myths or your own, or creating your own, you need to understand how myths come about. and their origins. So, today I'll be reading portions of the Book of Celtic Myths and, humor me, portions of the Faerie Handbook for educational purposes, but again, I'll only be reading portions for DMCA and copyright reasons. I will forever be emphasizing portions. So, starting with the Book of Celtic Myths, from the mystic might of the Celtic warriors to the magic of the Fae folk. The storied history and folklore of Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, and Wales. All right, summary on the back. Hear the tales of gods, monsters, and magic. Shit. Hear the tales of gods, monsters, magic, and more. Apparently, that is an ADHD thing where your brain suddenly skips ahead. 1-800, my bad. All right. Warriors, poets, scholars, and visionaries. From the depths of time, the ancient Celts have fascinated us. Their rich heritage lives on today. But who were they? From the Druids and fairies to King Arthur and Celtic Christianity, there is much to be learned about these natives of the British and Irish Islands. Their stories are fantastic and stirring, and through them you'll gain a glimpse into what life was like during the Iron Age. These legends, first told through song as people gathered around the fire more than 2,000 years ago, are now here for you to explore, experience the wonder and wisdom of these mysterious people with the Book of Celtic Myths. Cover designed by, finally found this. Cover designed by Celia McCardle. Printed by Simon and Schuster? Well, since word captions captured the word correctly, I'm going to guess I pronounced that correctly. Alright. So, there is no foreword or preface. There is an introduction, though. Alright, introduction. Who were the Celts? And right underneath that is a quote. The Celts and his cromlechs and his pillar stones, these will not change much. Indeed, it is doubtful if anybody at all changes at any time. In spite of hosts of deniers, and asserters, and wise men and professors, the majority still are averse to sitting down to dine 13 at table, or being helped to salt, or walking under a ladder, or seeing a single magpie flirting with checkered tail. Flirting his checkered tail. William Butler Yeats. 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 One of my favorite poets. Warriors, poets, scholars, and visionaries. From the depths of time, the ancient Celts fascinate us. Their rich heritage lives on today through the millions of people who claim Celtic ancestry. Celts and their traditions are among the foundation stones of our culture. But who were they? In the following pages, we will explore the wonder and wisdom of this mysterious people. The people we call the Celts arose about 7,000 years ago in the Caucasus Mountains, bordering the Black Sea. Rapidly, they moved west, settling in what are now France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. Finally, they crossed the North Sea, settling in Britain and Ireland. The Celts had no defining physical characteristics. What we mean today by the term Celt is people who spoke a certain family of languages. These include Scots Gaelic, Irish, Manx, Cornish, Welsh, and Breton. Sadly, most of the Celtic languages are extinct although a few, such as Welsh, have undergone a revival. As the Celts moved west, they found ancient monuments built by those who worked the land before them. Circles of standing stones, pointing like lonely fingers at the sky. Often isolated stones displayed carved designs featuring loops and whorls. 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 The Celts wove these places into their myths. The stones marked entrances to another world, they said. There dwelt the Tuatha de Danann. Tuatha. Okay. There dwelt the Tuatha de Danann, a strange folk of great magical craft and power. The most notable characteristic of these early Celts was their extraordinary artistic ability. Highly skilled metal workers, they introduced all of Europe to the art of iron forging and with it brought advances in agriculture and warfare. From the forges of the Celtic smiths came both farm implements and fearsome weapons, from swords to spears to great wheels for wagons and war chariots. These objects were common in the great Celtic civilization that arose in northern Italy about 300 BCE. The Latin culture. Ha! Close enough. It was these people who refined the artistic style we now associate with the Celts. Undulating lines, spirals, and the first appearance of what we all instinctively recognize today as the Celtic knot. Sinuous patterns of interlaced loops and curves. The Latin people flourished until they ran up against the rising power in Europe, Rome. The beginning of the conquest of European Celts by the Romans was described by Julius Caesar, by whom it was called the Gallic Wars, these wars continuing long after Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE. Is there a difference between Gallic Wars and Gallic Wars? Gallic. Gallic. Wars. These wars, continuing long after Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, were fought during the latter part of the 1st century BCE and for 150 years afterward. By the end, the Celts had been conquered, but their culture continued. Celts had passed across the North Sea to the British Isles. There they established themselves in the south and the north, and to the west in Ireland. Celtic society. Early Celtic society was divided into tribal groups called Tuatha. Tuatha. Tuath, Tuath, singular, was like a kingdom in miniature, a family group that usually claimed descent from a common ancestor. Each Tuath was headed by a king, or sometimes a queen, who usually claimed descent from one or more tribal ancestral deities. In times of peace, the king was both ruler and an administrator of justice. In times Whoa, I looked up at the word captions and something was off. So let me start that paragraph again and pull my phone closer to my mouth because it's working the captions. Each Tuath was headed by a king or sometimes a queen who usually claimed descent from one or more tribal ancestral deities. In times of peace, the king was both ruler and an administrator of justice. In times of conflict, he was a warlord. The king was vested in his office through his symbolic marriage with the land, which was personified as a goddess. This right of investiture ensured the fertility of the land and is echoed endlessly in mythological tales. Under the king were the nobles or flaitha, Flaitha, warriors, artisans, lawyers, poets, and other skilled citizens. Under the noble class were the freemen who kept the flocks, tilled the soil, and paid rent to the nobles. One respect in which the Celts were different from their neighbors is noteworthy. Women occupied an important place in society. Many of the most significant deities of the Celtic pantheons were female, ranging from powerful, nurturing earth mothers to fierce goddesses of war. The women of Celtic mythology are likewise portrayed as brave, resourceful, even crafty. These heroines did what they wanted, when they wanted, even when it meant disaster. Celtic wives often accompanied their husbands to battle and were not always content to keep to the sidelines. There are numerous accounts of Celtic warrior women and their achievements in battle. Some of these warrior women were so notable in their achievements that they became teachers of the art of war, owners of their own martial academies. Many became legendary. Sweet. The other world. The body of Celtic mythology gives much evidence of Celtic beliefs in reincarnation and life after death. These stories spoke of the other world, for although its entrances are usually under the earth, it is believed to exist commingled with the world of men and can even be reached by sea. At certain times of the year and in certain geographical locations, the veils or mists that conceal one world from the next could be breached, and both men and spirits could travel between them. And both men and spirits could travel between them. One such place, found in the Welsh otherworld, was Anwen, the Isle of Apples. Why? One such place, found in the Welsh otherworld, was Anwen, Anwen, the Isle of Apples, which came to be known later as Avalon and figures heavily in Arthurian legend, as we'll explore in a later chapter. Although Arthur is portrayed as a Christian king, it is to Avalon where he is taken to die for being mortally wounded by his nephew Mordred. Today, Avalon is often associated with the Great Tor, Tor, that soars above the town of Glastonbury in southern England. Glastonbury. I will spell it. Glastonbury. There is also much evidence that Celts believed in reincarnation. Mythological stories abound with episodes of rebirth and reincarnation, especially in relation to water. A repeating feature of battle stories is the cauldron or spring of rebirth, by which slain warriors return to life. The Celts were, as we can see, a deeply spiritual and artistic people. Gods, magic, and wisdom came up in... Oh, I read that wrong. Gods, magic, and wisdom made up an intimate part of their lives. In the following pages, we'll explore together the legends their bards sang as the people gathered around the fire and a pale moon shone down upon silent standing stones. Upon silent standing stones. All right. How many pages is chapter 1? I actually read this chapter 1 as lots of pages. Probably not going to get through the whole thing. I will stop. All right. Starts on page 13. I'll go to page 16 and see how long and look at the timer. All right. So, chapter 1, Celtic mythology and the Book of Invasions. The ancient Celts had a noted abhorrence of written records. They kept no scriptures, history, or genealogy and preferred to preserve their religious teachings through the sacred oral traditions of the Druids. Unfortunately, the majority of this ancient wisdom was lost forever with the coming of Christianity to the Celtic Isles. Druidry gave way to the persuasive proselytizing of westward sweeping Christians, and with none to take on the bardic task, the old ways gradually fell away. Ironically, the task of recording the remnants of Celtic mythology fell to the Christian monasteries, and the remnant of Celtic wisdom was preserved by those who destroyed it. Wow. I don't remember how I felt the first time I read that. Sources of Celtic mythology. Sources. In the time of the Druids, the ancient oral myths and stories were maintained in strict secrecy. As the Druidic tradition faded, these stories spread among the wider population. The Irish Church undertook to preserve Celtic mythology in the 7th century, when its monasteries began to set pagan tales to paper. These scribes of the church rewrote the ancient gods as human beings, heroes, and magicians, whose tales they regarded as the history of the Celts. As well, the monks often added Christian elements to the stories, because of course they did, often distorting them almost beyond recognition. Because these tales are presented as histories, they neglect any intentional exploration of Celtic theological ideas, resulting in a paucity of stories of the creation of Earth or mankind. The myth cycles do, however, give a very good idea of ancient Celtic customs and lifestyles, and they reveal much about the character of the ancient gods and goddesses. The greatest wealth of Celtic mythology is contained in 3 major collections of text known as the mythological cycle, the Ulster cycle, and the Finian or Fionn cycle. A looser, less regarded collection is known as the historical or King's cycle, a record of the lives and adventures of the legendary kings of Ireland. Another popular source of mythological tales is the Mabinogion. That's actually close. I'll spell it. Mabinogion. A series of Welsh mythological tales with early Arthurian elements. The Dagda and Brigid. Dagda. 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 D. What is going on with this? Okay. Dagda. Brigid. According to one version of the Celtic origin myth, not contained in the Book of Invasions, in the beginning there was a great void. Although the earth existed, it was in chaos, bubbling and boiling in confusion. Into this there poured from the skies streams of water that cooled the volcanoes and watered the deserts. They gave rise to life. From the newly formed soil sprang a great tree, a sacred oak named Beal. B Bile. The I has a little, or the dot up top is italicized. I forget how to describe that. There's an actual name for it. All right. The divine waters, called Danu, nourished and fed it until it produced two great acorns. From the first acorn came a god, the Dagda, who was male and known as the good god. From the second came a goddess, Brigid, or Brigid? Brigid? That's actually close. The exalted one. The two settled by a great stream of water. Since it had its origins in Danu, they named it Danuvius, a name that is preserved to the present day as the Danube River. Or is it Danube? Danube River, which flows through the European continent. The Dagda and Brigid built four great cities: Phalius, Gorius, Phineus, and Marius. Close. Gorias, Murias. Murias. Do I need to adjust the microphone settings on my phone? Possibly. The descendants of the Dagda and Brigid inhabited these cities. Those who paid special worship to Brigid and to the knowledge she imparted learned of crafts, of healing, and of poetry. The early Celtic word for knowledge was vid, and the word for oak was dru. Thus, in time, these people became the Druids, that is, the people possessing knowledge from the sacred oak. The children of the gods. The two foremost, I can talk, children of the Dagda and Brigid were Nuada and Ogma. Nuada was the favorite son of the Dagda, while Ogma was loved better by his mother. He was known as Ogma of the sunny countenance, and invented writing in a calligraphy that was called Ogham. Ogham. At last the Dagda and Brigid gathered their children and told them they were destined to populate the earth. The children of Dagda and Brigid left their cities and traveled to the island of Destiny, where they waited for their destiny to be fulfilled. Three of the children, beautiful sisters, were named Banba, Fotla, and Ire. Ha! Banba, Banba, Fotla, Eire. And each one hoped the island of Destiny would be named for her. Thus the Celts came to Ireland. differing versions. In other versions of the myth of the Dagda and Brigid, she is the daughter, not his mate. Nuada is sometimes described as the Dagda's predecessor, as High King of the Tuatha De Danann, and Ogama as the Dagda's half-brother. Muy interesante. And we are going to pause it here. Because next, from the mystic might of the Celtic warriors to the magic of the Fae folk. That was before I move on. So that was portions of the Book of Celtic Myths. We are now moving on to the Faerie Handbook, an enchanting compendium of literature, lore, art, recipes, and projects. Was there a summary on the back? Yes, there is. An alluring almanac of literature, lore, art, recipes, and projects to enchant the modern-day fairy lover, by the editors of Faerie magazine. This exquisite anthology welcomes you into an enchanted realm rich with myth, mystery, romance, and abounding natural beauty. Gorgeous, fine art and photographs, literature, essays, do-it-yourself projects, and recipes provide hours of reading, viewing, and dreaming pleasure, along with a multitude of ideas for modern-day living and entertaining with a distinctive fairy touch. I discovered one of my favorite poems in this book, actually. All right. Sweet. This isn't the poem. Sweet. Shut your eyes. The wildfire flies. Dance through the fairy neem. From the poppy bowl, for you I stole a little lovely dream. Sarojini Naidu, Cradle Song from The Golden Threshold, 1905. There you go. All right, contents. There is no foreword and preface, but there is an introduction. There's where we shall start. Okay. I love this book. Anyway, folklorists. I love this book. Folklorists, close enough, say that few people in history have believed in fairies themselves, but that they have always believed in a luminous, more romantic time in which others did. But I don't know. As editor-in-chief of Faerie magazine, I've met plenty of people who believe fervently in fairies or are open to the possibility of their existence. Too many of us have felt that hypnotic hush in the forest, seen a flicker of wings beating in the periphery, followed glowing lights that lure us onto another path. Maybe it doesn't really matter where the metaphor ends and the literal begins. What I do know is that fairies, in all their shimmering, gossamer, moonlit gorgeousness, tap into our deep longing for the world to be more than what we see. There's an old English story of a country midwife who's taken to a cottage that is seemingly normal, with a cozy fireplace, lamps, and the usual appointments, until she accidentally rubs her eye with a mysterious ointment, and then the world changes. To her astonishment, the neat cottage was transformed into a massive ancient oak tree, the fireplace a hollow, moss-grown trunk, and the lamps glowworms glimmering in the dark. In the old lore, being privy to fairy glamour isn't always the best idea, but I love the notion that there's an enchanted shadow world of tremendous beauty just out of our view. The Faerie Handbook is for all those fairy lovers who want a delicate escape, who see that old world oak with its moss-grown trunk, who love to read poetry and sip herbal tea on a fainting couch on a rainy afternoon in front of a fire. or walk in long dresses over dewy lawns, feeling the wet grass on their feet and watching the light break over the landscape. This is a book that is meant to stir up childhood wonders, whether it's picking blueberries on a hazy summer afternoon or those countless hours spent obsessively poring over a treasured storybook filled with color, saturated illustrations you're delighted to meet again and again. This book is for all those girls and boys, the ones who love fairy tales and full moons and who love nothing more than to attend an extravagant tea party in the forest. In lore, a magical ointment rubbed on the eyes could pierce through fairy glamour and allow a human to see past our own dull world. As Yeats called it in The Land of Heart's Desire, to let it fade away and the fairy world come into view. May this book be your ointment. Carolyn Turgeon. All right, entering Chapter 1, Flora and Fauna. Flora and Fauna. Ooh, sorry. I was expecting that to be a hiccup. Excuse me. Hope you didn't hear that. Where fairies live, the best place to find fairies is in an enchanted forest, where one might spy them reclining on velvety mats of soft moss, the woodland equivalent of a chase lounge, or darting about the silkiest, most fashionable flowers, or lolling within the petals to inhale their rich perfume. One might also discover them sprinkling dew over every blade of grass, the curved edges of foliage, the delicate blooms, as renowned fairy expert William Shakespeare noted in his revelatory report, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Shakespeare also observed that fairy queens sleep on banks where the wild thyme blows, where ox slips and the nodding violet grows. But today some say that practice has passed out of fashion, given the proliferation of fairy houses worldwide. Still, most fairies love the wild outdoors and are deep down more comfortable tucking themselves into tree boughs or knolls or finding shelter under fallen leaves than in elaborately outfitted dwellings, more regularly inhabited by humans. Nonetheless, there have been reports of fairies living in ornately decorated palaces, echoing with the enchanting melodies of singing birds within hollow hills. And not the light from these palaces illuminate the hillside, a dazzling display akin to the glow of countless diamonds. There are some fairies who are attracted to water and may be proponents of island life in locales such as the Isle of Man, Tir Nanog, High Brasail, and Avalon. I'm going to spell that one. High Brasail, Hybresail. And Avalon. Others live in the water, such as pools or lakes, though these aqueous bodies may sometimes be illusions to protect the palatial affluence therein from outsiders. More free-spirited types may cavort with frogs, who may or may not ow who may or may not be princes in disguise, as the case may be, and make their homes upon satiny lily pads or among the velvet reeds. Very small font. Specific fairy types do prefer less frou-frou dwellings. Trolls, for example, like to align themselves with bridges, especially those made of stone. Some dwarves and elves can be found in less than sunny caves. Hobgoblins and brownies are fond of crashing human dwellings and have been known to occasionally outstay their welcomes. And then there are jet-setting fairies who travel light. They flit from place to place, visiting enchanted forests, lakes, and bridges all over the world, much to the extreme envy of their homebound friends, who can't bear to hear one more story about that darling little toadstool I found in Paris. Vivid orchids and wonderful colored lichens smoldered upon the swarthy tree trunks, and where a wandering shaft of light fell full upon the golden alamanda, the scarlet star clusters of the taxonia, Tacsonia, or the rich deep blue of Ipomea. Probably have to, yeah, I'm going to spell that one. Ipomaea. The effect was as a dream of fairyland. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Last Word, 1912. The Lost World, 1912. Why are the fonts so small? All right, a select list of fairy inhabitants. Ow. Faerie is a vast and diverse place, full of so many different kinds of unusual sentient creatures that to attempt to fully catalogue the wide variety of beings who dwell there is nearly impossible. Here is a general guide to some of the most commonly referenced denizens of the fairy world. Brownies and boggarts. Brownies are small and helpful house fairies who dwell in close proximity to humans, either in their homes or outbuildings such as barns. These are the fairy creatures for whom it is wise to leave out some bread and honey to acknowledge their services. But never disrespect a brownie, or it may become irate and vengeful. Angry brownies, or boggarts, as they are called, bring bad luck to a home, making milk curdle and tying your hair in knots while you sleep. The danger of angering a brownie figures into the folk beliefs of the Northumberland, England, which say that a brownie turned boggart can be appeased by placing salt outside the bedroom door or hanging a horseshoe on the door. In a Welsh story, a buca, BWCA, Welsh for brownie, got along well with a Monmouthshire family because he was well treated by a servant girl who left him cream every night. One night she played a prank and left him stale urine instead, and screamed for help when he viciously attacked her in response. The character Thimbletack is an example of a monarch in contemporary fiction. He figures in The Field Guide, the first book in the Spiderwick Chronicles series by Holly Black and Tony DiTerlizzi. And Tony DiTerlizzi. I'm probably, yeah. DITERLIZZI. Okay. Dwarves, best known from the fairy tale Snow White. Dwarves are mountain-dwelling fairy creatures associated with mining and gem crafting. They're smaller than humans and known for their stocky build and beards. Dwarves hail from Norse mythology, but unlike the characters in the popular version of Snow White, the dwarves found in some of the earliest Norse stories were considered supernatural beings and were never described as short. In fact, 4 of the dwarves in the 13th century Icelandic tome, Prose Edda, Iclandic. Prose, Ida, Edda, are said to hold up the sky. Said to hold up the sky. Dwarves were a powerful people who would be appalled to know they've been named for their allergies, shyness, unpleasant demeanor, or lack of intelligence. Elves. In the fiction of J.R.R. Tolkien, the elves are an ancient race of tall, beautiful, ethereal, and supernaturally long-lived beings. This description makes them seem similar to the Celtic Tuatha De Danann. Ooh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? See Sidhe, page 21. Although Tolkien also drew inspiration for his elves from figures in Old Norse mythology, namely the Yolsafar? Ljosalfar. A race of good elves who live in the air, dance on the grass, or sit in trees, and are human-like in stature as opposed to the swarthier, smaller Dúkalfar. Dokkkalfar. Delta, Oscar, Kangaroo, Alpha, Lima, Foxtrot, Alpha, Romeo. At least it gets the phonetic spelling. All right. Bad elves who live underground and inflict illnesses on humans. In contemporary culture, elves are commonly portrayed as the diminutive creatures who assist the jolly old elf, himself Santa Claus, in the preparation of toys and gifts for children every Christmas. Then there are the Keebler elves, small fairy beings with a thing for pointed shoes who have baked cookies in a tree for decades. A seemingly dangerous proposition. Both of these depictions are based on a Victorian image of elves as small men and women with pointy ears and caps. Richard Doyle's illustrations for Andrew Lang's fairy tale Princess Nobody, 1884, featured both elves and fairies. Although both creatures are small, the fairies have wings and the elves don their signature red stocking caps. The earlier Germanic and Scandinavian uses of the word elf, however, were considered to be much more interchangeable with the word fairy. Fauns. Fauns are creatures of Roman mythology, though closely associated with the satyrs of Greek myths. Fauns. Fauns. They are forest-dwelling half-men with horns or antlers and either goat or deer feet and legs. As folkloric representations of the wildness of nature, and the forest in particular, fauns are amoral creatures who have hindered and aided humans in seemingly equal measure. Fauns appear in C.S. Lewis's Narnia series. Best known is the character Mr. Tumnus, who first tries to kidnap, but then helps the child Lucy when she arrives in Narnia. In his essay, It All Began with a Picture, Lewis explains that the series stemmed from an image he'd been seeing in his mind since he was 16. That of a faun carrying an umbrella and parcels in a snowy wood. When he was 40, he said to himself, let's try to make a story about it. Gnomes. Most often portrayed with long white beards and jovial expressions, and clad in tall red caps, gnomes first appeared by name in the 16th century writing of Swiss-German philosopher and alchemist Paracelsus, Paracelsus, who wrote of them as earth elementals, forest dwellers who are reluctant to deal with humans. Over time, however, the gnomes of fairy lore have gained a reputation for being mostly friendly and kind to humans, though they still prefer to live in the forests or underground. Gnomes appear in numerous works of contemporary literature, notably in Narnia's books by C.S. Lewis, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, and Terry Brooks' Shannara books. Goblins. Small, malicious creatures resembling demons. Goblins are known for their greed and tempers. They first appeared by the name of goblin around the Middle Ages in Europe, but can be found with varying details to their personalities in the tales of many countries. For example, the red cap of Anglo-Scottish folklore gets his red chapeau. Did I not pronounce it chapeau? Chapeau. From dipping it in the blood of those he has killed. But there is also a rare occurrence of a friendly goblin in the 13th century Latin book Gesta Romanorum. I'm definitely going to spell that one. Gestanorum, which has a tale titled How, in a certain part of England, thirsty hunters were given refreshment by a benevolent goblin, a plot of which is rather self-explanatory. Goblins vary in size and shape and are said to be easily distracted by the promise or sight of gold. They can also be terrible tempters, as in Christina Rossetti's haunting and erotically charged poem Goblin Market, where they lure victims to their doom with luscious, irresistible fruit. Leprechauns. Irish in origin, leprechauns do not appear often in older mythology. They're fairy cobblers who make and repair shoes. They are solitary figures known for their green wardrobe, buckle shoes, and pots of gold at the end of a rainbow. In literature, prior to the 20th century, though, leprechauns were usually described as wearing all red rather than green. If you catch one, he may grant you 3 wishes in exchange for his freedom. But be careful. Leprechauns enjoy a good practical joke. An old Celtic folk tale, The Field of Boliauns, Boliauns, tells of a man who found a leprechaun and convinced the cobbler to show him a bush in a field under which a crock of gold was buried. The man had no digging utensils, so he marked the spot with a red garter and left to get his shovel. He made the leprechaun swear not to remove the garter, and the wily leprechaun agreed. Returning to the field, the man couldn't find his treasure. While the marker was still there, the leprechaun had covered every neighboring bush with a red garter too. Good one. All right, I'm going to read 2 more. Next one, pixies. Pixies are the whimsical and tiny fairy creatures often depicted in Victorian fairy paintings and the popular work of artist Cicely Mary Barker. Uh, Cicely. Everything else is right. Pixies do often have wings and love dancing and playing games. They're also fond of flowers and gardens. Pixies are often drawn to laughter, children, and merrymaking. Tinker Bell from J. M. Barrie's Peter Pan is a pixie. Alright, and last one. I think I'm pronouncing this wrong, but the Sidhe. Sidhe. The Sidhe are the more modern versions of the Tuatha De Danann, the fairy race of old Ireland who were great masters of magic and appeared in early Celtic mythic tales such as Tokmark Etain. Tochmarc. Marc. Etaine. After being conquered by the sons of Meal, ancestors of the Irish people, the Tuatha De Danann retreated underground and dwindled into the still unearthly beautiful but diminished Sidhe. The word Sidhe originally referred to the fairy mounds where these beings lived. Tad Williams' Scythe race, from his epic fantasy trilogy Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, is akin to the Sidhe. And, oh, I'll just read the last one because it finishes off this portion of the chapter. Trolls. Beings of earth and stone, varying in size from massive giant-like creatures to smaller creatures hardly a foot tall. Trolls originate from Norse mythology and are closely connected with a particular location, such as bridges or mountains. Trolls do not tend to be friendly to humans, but they're not particularly antagonistic either. Many stone landmarks are associated with trolls. Some of these landmarks are said to be trolls themselves turned to stone. Trolls appear in fairy tales such as Three Billy Goats Gruff and in the art of Edwardian painter John Bower and modern fairy painter Brian Froud. Froud? Replace the P in proud with an F and you got the man's last name. All right. And that is a portion of the first chapter of the Faerie Handbook and its introduction. All right. That was fun. Not being sarcastic. I love those two books. I might reread them. Ha! And with that, we come to a close. Or we're going to hit the closing. Alright, so all that there might be a lot. It kind of is. So well, rewind. Thank you all for watching. Here are all the myriad of links and things where you can find me. Monria Titans. I actually need to change that. I'll do it later. So Monria Titans and WGS there next to the YouTube icon. I actually dropped the WGS portion. I have turned Monria Titans basically into the umbrella. That's the main thing. And then WGS and the Titans and Raya art are underneath that umbrella. All the same thing. So you can support me on. There are 3 separate Ko-fis. I will explain them a bit. And there's Buy Me a Coffee. So if you want to help promote literacy, you can tip me at Buy Me a Coffee. And 15% of the proceeds minimum go to Kids Need to Read, whose mission is to help children discover the joy of reading. and the power of a literate mind. There we go. And then on ko-fi.com/artist shoutouts, all funds that go there will be going back to the artist shoutouts in the form of boosting, aka ads on social media to get them more exposure. With ko-fi.com/Mariah Titans, since I'm unemployed, I'm going to have to put the Steam wishlist goal on the back burner, but that was initially what the goal was for. And after I bought everything on there, I was going to change it to something else. And then there's ko-fi.com/Titans and Mariah Art. That is my art handle. I am an artist myself. And I recently created, with the help of Canva and the app Shade, desktop wallpaper size color palettes for anyone who just wants some ideas on, or basically to get out of a artist block, look at all the colors, see if you can come up with anything. I made 3, and you can find them on my Titans and Raya art shop for free. And then I already explained buy me a coffee. But my all-time favorite thing that I have here, my favorite affiliation, is bookshop.org, what I like to call the Etsy for small business bookstores. You want to buy more books, get away from Amazon, give me a hand. Well, that's 3 skips with a stone. You can go to bookshop.org/shop/Mariah Titans. I have quite a few bookshelves on there, and if you'd use the search bar up there at the top, as long as it says up there in that left-hand corner, Mariah Titans Bookshop, books through the link, I should still get a commission for. And with that, we come to a close. I'm actually tired. Well, that's not true. I was already tired. But I wanted to do this. I love doing these. I need to do them more. And now we come to a close. Remember, we are gamers not because we don't have a life, but because we choose to have many, which can also be said of readers. If anyone asks you why you like video games, remind them a game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude. A quote by Jesse Schell. And if anyone gives you shit for your interest, tell them you may not like video games, but what I learned from them is this: no enemies in front of you means you are going the wrong way. Thank you for watching. May every decision you make in the future be in the spirit of fairness, and may the rest of your day not go to shit. See you next time.